Okay, good morning. Today I'll continue on with just a little bit more reading from Forest Recollections, and then I'll finish with a very beautiful talk by Ajahn Mun. And so I just wanted to begin with just by reading the last section from the chapter that I had started yesterday on overcoming bodily suffering. And this section is called Facing Death. Progress in meditation necessitates intensive and sustained practice, which requires seclusion and freedom from distractions. During their periods of seclusion, Tudong monks went through an arduous training that sometimes brought them close to death. Indeed, watching a fellow monk die of jungle fever was not an uncommon experience among the Tudong monks. Ajahn Mun did so in 1918 when he and 4 Lao monks were staying in a forest in what is now Takanto District, Kalasin Province. At the time, the area was remote and wild. The monks set up their own hermitage for the rains retreat. Soon all but one of them had come down with jungle fever. Although they took care of one another as best they could, by the middle of the retreat, one of them had already died. Seeing a fellow monk die, Ajahn Mun was moved to put more energy into his meditation practice, and he contemplated his own death. Ajahn Mun credited his survival to this meditation. He recalled that while in samadhi, he had a vision in which his body appeared to merge with the Buddha image. He continued to meditate all day and all night until he was able to remove defilements from his mind. Ajahn Mun had a similar experience the following year. In 1919, he and a young novice spent the rains retreat at the edge of a forest near Kutkom village in Sakonnakhon. When the novice came down with malaria, Ajahn Mun tried his best to nurse him, but the fever was beyond cure. Watching the boy die, Ajahn Mun remarked sadly, quote, "It's a pity that there was no medicine. Were medicine available, he might not have died. He was still young." The experiences of nursing and facing his companion's untimely death taught the monk many things, especially about the truth of impermanence, suffering, patience, and compassion. Ajahn Mun's biography illustrates how the skilled meditator with tremendous patience dealt with pain. During 1946, Ajahn Mun was spending the rains retreat alone at the hermitage of Pong village in Meitang district, Chiang Mai. A painfully infected wound from a dog bite on his leg prevented him from going for alms. There were no other monks or novices in the hermitage, and the villagers in the area did not pay much attention to him. A fellow monk, Nu, was staying at Mai Peng Mountain in Pra, another district. Many Tudong monks believed that the mental currents of different individuals can impinge on one another, and this seems to have happened between Ajahn Mun and Nu. One day, while Nu was meditating, an image appeared. He saw Ajahn Mun lying on the ground. When he came out of his samadhi, he reflected on this image and concluded that it was a sign that something had happened to his friend. So the following morning, he walked to Pong village, where he found Ajahn Mun in serious condition. Nu asked the villagers to fetch a doctor, and they brought Ji, a man who had been in the army and had sufficient nerve to perform surgical operations. Ji removed the infected tissue from Ajahn Mun's wound in an hour-long operation without anesthetic. Ajahn Mun kept his mind concentrated in samadhi. According to the biographer, quote, "Ajahn Mun calmly lay down and remained motionless, as if in deep sleep. When the surgery was over, Ji dressed the wound. About 5 minutes later, Ajahn Mun came out of samadhi and opened his eyes. Nu asked, 'Were you in pain?' Ajahn Mun replied, 'It was bearable.' Ji had no pain reliever to give him. The next day, when Ji returned to clean the wound, Ajahn Mun told him, 'Be more gentle today. Yesterday your hand was quite heavy.' This is all he said." Nu nursed Ajahn Mun for a week before he returned to Mai Pang Mountain. This was in the middle of the rains retreat, when monks were not supposed to travel. He asked some villagers to look after Ajahn Mun and admonished them for neglecting the monk. It took Ajahn Mun several months, until April the following year, to recover from the raw surgery. Even then, he was unable to walk very far. Endurance or perseverance, oton, were qualities highly praised not only by Tudong teachers, but also by lay people of the Northeast, who were proud of their ability to endure difficulties, and respectful of those who faced hardship with courage. Take, for example, Ajahn Mun's experience in 1913 at Great Mountain, Khao-Yai in Nakhon Nayok. At the time, there were many isolated caves in the Central Plains, and Ajahn Mun had been wandering from one cave to another when he heard about the sinister Sarika cave. The local people warned him about a great demon who guarded the cave and tolerated no intruders. They also told him that 6 wandering monks had died of serious diseases while staying there. Ajahn Mun, however, was not discouraged by the villager's story. He saw it as a challenge and made up his mind to go to the cave and face whatever might happen. At the Ajahns' insistence, the villagers led him up to this quiet, secluded cave. His first 2 nights were uneventful. The body and mind both rested satisfactorily. The only noises he occasionally heard were from wild animals roaming the area. On the 3rd night, however, he was stricken with stomach pain. Ajahn Mun had been afflicted with hemorrhoids and gastric pain since his younger days, but this time his condition was more serious. He developed diarrhea, felt weak, and lost his appetite. He remembered the villagers' accounts of Tudong monks who had died in that cave. If this illness continued, he thought he might meet with a similar fate. In the morning, some villagers stopped by, and Ajahn Mun took them to gather medicinal roots in the forest. After several days of taking this medicine, his stomach condition worsened. He became more enfeebled, and his willpower waned. The bowel trouble brought on a fever. Ajahn Mun refused to give in to self-indulgent patterns of response to illness and pain. Quote, "Why should I become disheartened and enfeebled by this pain and suffering?" he asked himself. Seeing that the medicines were proving useless, Ajahn Mun stopped taking them. He also did not go for alms round for 3 days, since his stomach pain had grown worse. Meanwhile, he sought to balance his energy through sitting meditation, relying on the therapeutic effect of the Dhamma alone. Attachment to life was then abandoned, whereupon the body was allowed to undergo its natural curing process. No attention was paid to the disease as to whether or not it could be cured or whether it would destroy the body. The pitched battle raged from dusk to midnight and ended with the mind being considerably empowered and able to realize the nature of the aggregates, including the gripping pain which had been fully manifesting itself. The illness totally disappeared and the mind withdrew into absolute, unshakable one-pointedness. When the mind later emerged to a less profound and more responsive level called upachara, there seemed to be a light radiating from his body, which revealed a tall black man about 10 meters high. He was carrying a club about 4 meters long and as big around as his leg. In Ajahn Mun's vision, the demon threatened to kill him if he did not leave the cave. Ajahn Mun refused to get up. A disciple of his, Wiryam, records Ajahn Mun's description of his experience. Quote, "Suddenly the demon hit him with a gigantic stick. Ajahn Mun felt as if his body had been buried 50 meters deep into the ground. Then it floated up above the ground. Having no fear, he remained focused in his meditation. The demon then uprooted a nearby ironwood tree with both hands. The trunk was so gigantic that it would have taken 10 men to encircle it. The demon hit the Ajahn with the tree until his body was flattened out on the rock where he sat. At this point, he almost lost his mindfulness and opened his eyes, but he did not give in. Ajahn Mun's battle with the demon lasted into the early morning hours. Finally, he defeated the demon and admonished him to accept the Dhamma. When Ajahn Mun emerged from his samadhi, quote, "The disease which had raged during the early stage of his practice had totally disappeared." Ajahn Mun's acceptance of his illness was the result of the steady energy he put into his meditation. He directed his mind onto the feeling of suffering itself, focusing on the pain without trying to escape or resist, until his mind withdrew into one-pointedness. After this experience in the cave, the chronic illness which had troubled Ajahn Mun for so long was completely cured, for, quote, "His mind had attained to a level where many doubts were cleared away, and many kinds of knowledge occurred to him which he had never dreamed of before, both of the eradication of defilements and of how to apply such methods of eradication to various individuals with different dispositions." On the 4th day, Ajahn Mun went to the village for alms. That day he contemplated why the other wandering monks had died in this cave. The first monk had lasted for 2 months, the second for 3, the third for 4, and the 4th, 5th, and 6th for 5 to 7 months. Ajahn Mun noted that each monk had broken a rule in the Vinaya that he had been following. The first Tudong monk had stored food in the cave. The second monk had cut a tree to build 2 raised platforms, one to serve as a bed inside the cave, another for sitting outside the cave. The third monk had dug wild roots in the forest and boiled them for food. The fourth, fifth, and sixth monks each had stored food that he received on alms round and had also picked fruit in the forest. As he saw it, these monks all died because they had violated the Vinaya in some way, whereas he had strictly adhered to his ascetic practices. Indeed, adhering to the disciplinary rules was an essential element in the teaching of this Tudong master. He and other wandering monks drew confidence from their conviction that purity and asceticism were shields protecting them from danger. Ajahn Mun lived alone in Sarika Cave for a whole year. Through intensive practice in solitary confinement, he learned a great deal about himself and about pain. Once he accepted pain, observed it, and did not run from it, he found that he could work with it. The experience transformed him. He told a disciple that, quote, "From then on, whenever I felt ill, I have not counted on medicine alone. Most of the time I meditated until the pain disappeared. I used meditation to overcome my illness, just as the Buddha taught in the Bojjhanga Sutta. Thus have I heard, once when the Buddha was ill, he exerted himself in meditation on the 7 Bojjhanga factors of enlightenment. His illness went away. Although I had strong faith in the dhamma that I heard, my faith was not confirmed until I put the dhamma into practice. Then it became true faith." It was in Sarika Cave that Ajahn Mun was said to have attained the stage of non-returner, anagami. He was about 40 years old then, and in his 21st year of the wandering life. As these accounts suggest, one of the most distinctive aspects of the Tudong tradition is its insistence on self-reliance. Among people in the Northeast, it was considered a virtue to be able to face hardship and endure pain. No matter how ill he was, the thought of leaving the monkhood never crossed the mind of a serious Tudong monk. He would sooner die in his robes. This attitude stands in stark contrast to that of clerical monks, the followers of Bangkok directives, many of whom had little tolerance for physical hardship and were inclined to disrobe in time of illness. Indeed, among the letters written by administrative monks to the Supreme Patriarch asking for permission to disrobe, most of them give, quote, "too ill to remain in the monastic life" as their reason. Wandering meditation monks often intimated that book-learning monks generally do not want to experience suffering or difficulty. Quote, "They want everything to be cozy." Ajahn Chah sums up the Tudong experience thus, quote, "The monks suffered many deprivations living like this. If someone caught malaria and went to ask for medicine, the teacher would say, 'You don't need medicine, keep practicing.' Besides, there simply weren't all the drugs that are available now. All one had were herbs and roots that grew in the forest. The environment was such that monks had to have a great deal of patience and endurance. They didn't bother over minor ailments. Nowadays you get a bit of an ache and you're off to the hospital." Having learned to observe the mind and contemplate feelings in times of illness, the wandering monks learned that pain is not a static experience, but is constantly changing. They came to see that bodily sensations are just what they are, and that thoughts and feelings are something apart from sensations. The Tudong monks realized that since the mind plays a large part in creating suffering, it could free one from suffering as well. By exerting themselves in meditation and being mindful of it, they learned that pain was just another experience. In return, pain taught them how to cultivate calmness, concentration, and equanimity. But it was never an easy lesson to learn. Okay, so now I will just finish by reading a short Dhamma talk from Ajahn Mun, and this is from the book Patipada, and this is as remembered by Ajahn Mahabua. "Those large trees over there are thick with leaves, shady and peaceful, suitable for the practice of bhavana. The weather is good and the place is free from the disturbance and confusion of the world. Those hills are places where your eyes and ears will open in the joy of Dhamma. Over there are caves and overhanging cliffs, all good places to stay and develop the practice and search for peace and happiness of heart. In those wild forests, you will be able to get rid of all kinds of laziness and fear. A lazy or timid person should go and live in such a place, for it will help him to develop effort and diligence, and also to overcome his fear so that he becomes more courageous and bold and relieves the load and pressure on his heart, which has become too heavy. Over on that hill, in that cave, or under that overhanging cliff, the air is good. It is right for bhavana, and the citta can easily become concentrated and drop into a state of calm. Once the citta has become calm, one will be able to see various strange and mysterious things that are beyond the ordinary level of perception. On that hill, in that cave, under that cliff, there are such things out there, and anyone who goes to stay there should be careful and self-controlled. They should not carelessly think that because there are no other people and things to be seen or heard, that there is nothing else there, for there are many things which are more mysterious and subtle than the ordinary citta is able to experience. In fact, there is far more than the material things which we see about us in this world, but we have no senses which are suitably adapted to display clearly their existence to us in the way we perceive other things in the world. So even though they are there, few or many as it may be, it is as though they did not exist at all. On that hill, in that cave, and under that overhanging cliff, I have stayed and practiced there. They are places that capture the heart and free it from all worry and concern connected with the distractions and disturbances of the world. If you have it in your heart to seek the realm of freedom from dukkha, you should search for such places in which to stay, to practice, and to put your life and everything into the hands of Dhamma. Then it will be as though the great teacher in person were sitting in front of you in all situations. Both asleep and awake, you will be happy, and the work connected with the heart will progress steadily and not hesitatingly and desultorily as it does in places that are distracting and disturbing. The Lord Buddha and all the Savaka Arahants made sacrifices, and they made the sacrifice of giving their lives to Dhamma in such places. But those who see no harm in the kilesas, tanha, and the round of samsara are engrossed in aimlessly wandering and reserving room in the cemetery of birth and death. The way that they go about is that of people who have no destination at the end of the road, and they find no pleasure in those places where the Buddha and the Arahants were glad to stay. Here is a charnel ground, and over there a wild jungle. Go and live in such places with the hill and forest people. They are places which in all ways will give you the incentive to work to cut away at the endless process of going the round of samsara in your heart, making it weaker at every stage of striving. Those who do such work in a place that is suitable and with the desire to get rid of the anxiety of coming to birth and death for many more lives are very different from the ordinary run of people in the world. But in an unsuitable place, even though they walk chankama or sit in meditation for the same amount of time, the results are likely to be very different. This is because their attentiveness, the closeness with which mindfulness and wisdom follow their minds, and the general feeling about things in their surrounding environment are all different. So the results which come from conditions that are different must also be different. One who practices the way and truly takes the Buddha as his refuge should recollect the Dhamma that he gave to us far more than the difficulties and hardships, of which the fear of death is the most important. Others include such things as lack of the four requisites, such as the food which is attained on the alms round, the difficulty experienced in making the effort to train and discipline the citta which is wild, uncouth, and adventurous, for this is its primordial nature, and the hardships involved in walking or sitting in meditation over a long stretch of time, which creates painful feelings that torment both the body and heart. There are also hardships which are due to the citta refusing to give way and live within the prescribed boundary which is required. The hardships of hunger and weakness due to taking little food, because of not eating for a day or two or fasting for many days, accordingly as it suits each individual's characteristics, so that the work of heart can develop more easily. The hardships of living alone and loneliness with no friends around, nor the teacher who has trained and taught one and shared knowledge and experience together. the hardship of thinking about home, relatives, and friends who used to give a sense of warmth and comfort, the hardship of being soaked wet by rain and having to put up with the suffering of having no shelter against the sun and rain, the hardship of feeling cold and numb, as well as aches and pains which have come from various causes, the hardship of getting a fever with headache, heat and pain in various parts of the body, and having no medicine or means of looking after oneself, the hardship of fearing death while living alone in the forests or mountains without anyone to look after and protect one, and after one has died, nobody to take care of the corpse which would remain for the crows, vultures, dogs, and flies to fight over and eat. All these kinds of thoughts are obstacles on the path toward Nibbana. One must not give way and let them trouble one's heart, for they can ruin a person, and he will not be able to get through to the good. One should realize straight away that these thoughts are the substance of the world of causal uprising, samudaya. They are the key which unlocks dukkha, so that it arises and overwhelms the heart until it can find no way out. One who practices must have the courage and endurance to put up with the sun, rain, hunger, and the various kinds of suffering and hardship that arise within the body and heart, as well as putting up with the various aches and pains which come to one, both externally and internally, and which are accepted by everyone as things that all are bound to have in one way or another. He who practices must train his heart to become firm and strong, to withstand the force of the storms which are always waiting for a chance to arise. They generally arise from the heart itself, where they are poised ready to break in and invade one and disable one's resolve to work with effort, so that one becomes weak and ineffectual, and one's previous strength, resolve, and readiness to put up with difficulties steadily diminishes, until one can no longer progress at all. Finally, one comes to a stop, submerged and groping about in dukkha, as one used to be before one started out. Day by day, one drifts further away from the great teacher, and Bhutang Saranang Gacchami become mere words which anyone can repeat. But the important thing is that the truth of the word Bhutang becomes steadily more insipid and disappears from one's heart. This is what the Lord called one who has given up, defeated by kilesa maras, which means that he is unable to fight against his own low and baneful thoughts. One who is defeated by kilesa maras gives way and lets the mass of dukkha in his sankharas trample on him and destroy him in vain, without his having the ability to find a way of thinking out how to cure himself by means of mindfulness and wisdom. For he has enough mindfulness and wisdom with which he could escape and get himself out of the situation by using the skillful ways of a warrior to save himself from the abyss. Whatever enemies there may be in the sphere of the world, none of them have such a subtle and penetrating power as the enemies within the heart, the kilesas and tanha. These enemies are a very heavy burden for people who tend to be weak, lazy, and not much good at thinking and reasoning, so that whenever anything happens to them, they just wait and lose out without trying to think for themselves of a way of fighting and striving to get out of it. This is the type of character which the kilesa maras delight in, and whoever wants to be their favorite should train themselves in this way and accumulate such characteristics so as to become their most favored servant, the kind who never emerges and lifts his face up to see the light of the meaning of Dhamma, that which can lead them to final freedom from dukkha. Under whatever conditions they are born in the future, they will then submit their hearts to the kilesas. Their hearts which are worthy is an offering to the very highest. But the kilesas are the ones that always have the power of command over Dhamma in their hearts. When one thinks about this, it is very sad to see even bhikkhus who are of the type that practice the way, giving in to such vile influences without using any mindfulness and wisdom to pull themselves up a bit. Enough, at least, to breathe and live with the peace of Dhamma, as should be the case with those who practice the way, going into the hills and caves, carrying the glot and bowl, to practice and develop their bhavana. But you who have come here to train and practice in this way, are you then going to give way to the kilesas and tanha, and let them walk all over you and destroy you, and then chant the funeral ceremony for you as they feel like it? If so, then the teacher's heart will break and he will surely die before his pupils do. Okay, we'll just leave it there for today. And does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask today? All right, well, if there aren't any questions, then thank you.